Yeah, I think I'll also ask if there's anyone who's joined us virtually who wants to, make a public comment. Add them to this.
Second question, am I correct that this is over there?
Above properties.
Yeah.
Is it then?
It's not really part of the public meeting. Okay, I'll move to amend.
Not really public. Yeah.
All right, 2 minutes. All right, so okay.
2 minutes. Did anybody need a vote to make it here tonight?
No, but I did not get my usual call from my mother asking me if everything's okay because she saw coastal flood advisory. I'm like, I'm not on the coast.
I'm pretty sure the storm was in Texas last night based on the number of texts I got from my family last night. And it was a doozy, so.
4 Mile Run was running pretty high today. I was like, well, I was like, either by the time I get home, the street will be flooded or it'll be all good. We'll see.
Well, it goes to 11:30, but as of now, no major power outages.
I think there's some, but not here. Dominion said.
I haven't seen, the county put out like they do.
And it might have been Northern Virginia. Too.
Yes, sorry.
Christchurch or someplace like that.
Unless she agrees to not be, unless she agreed herself to be vice chair. That's the only way we can.
All right, we'll get started it is 6 p.m.
Yeah.
All right. All right, this meeting is being recorded and will be available on our website within 24 hours of the meeting. I move that this meeting of the Arlington Electoral Board be called to order on January 9th at 6 p.m.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the minutes. I'm gonna move that the minutes from the December 18th, 2023 meeting be approved. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and I'm just gonna take a quick pause here. Just
We
to,
need to amend the agenda.
I'm gonna move to amend the agenda to strike item 7, as it is not a public function of the board. It probably should not be part of the public agenda.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so item 7 is struck from the agenda because it's not public. Okay, so I'm just going to pause here really briefly and ask if there's anyone who has called in on Teams who would like to make a public comment, just so we can add you to the list.
You see who's online. You see Rob Farr and Kitty. Click on people.
There's someone with a phone number.
Yeah, probably not.
Okay. All right, so hearing none, we have our list for public comment. Gretchen has a list of speakers, so we will go ahead and go into public comments.
At the last meeting, I understand there was.
Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm
and
sorry.
if you're affiliated with any or speaking on behalf of any organizations, identify that organization. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. Constance Potter, co-president legal voters of Arlington and Alexandria City. At the last meeting, there was a discussion of when people mail in their ballots, it costs the voters 66 cents to mail in the ballot. It doesn't cost the voter anything because there are postage return is paid by the county. They get a permit and it varies every election, but the county does pay the postage for mailing ballots. That's it.
Thank you. Next,
Okay.
Steve.
Thanks so much.
I want to thank the board for the opportunity.
Wait, you have to do the same thing.
Name and organization.
We all know who you are, but.
It's,
It's in the
it was
speech.
the next line.
Okay.
Madam
my
Chair,
throat is
may
full.
I reclaim my time?
Yes, reset and go.
I want to thank the board for the opportunity to speak. My name is Steve Baker. I am the current chair of the Arlington County Democratic Committee. I do want to thank Frank for his presentation last month on drop boxes. I am always open to hear different views, and I do appreciate that the group he represents does hold concerns about the election process. However, it may not surprise you, I'm here to respectfully rebut both the premise and conclusions of that presentation. The first observation made was about the trend line in Dropbox utilization, namely that 2020 saw 12,000 votes, 2021 had 3,100, then 2,300, last year 1,961. As pointed out by our registrar, we know that the presidential year is always the highest year and the constitutional year is always the lowest. Correlation is never causation, or is not necessarily causation. I will note, however, that 2023 actually saw a year-over-year uptick in Dropbox use from 2.5% to 2.9%. 4 years does not an analysis make, and we need several election cycles to successfully measure trends. The solutions that were offered were to either limit Dropbox use to the final 10 days of early voting, or to reduce the number of drop boxes from 9 to 3, or something thereabouts. The benefits promised were reduced costs, increased efficiency, and potentially lower fraud. With respect to cost and efficiency, the Dropbox maintenance, including daily ballot pickup, estimated by this department at $3,500 for the full 45-day voting period. $3,500, that's for a department with over a $2.1 million budget in a county that in the current fiscal cycle has over a $1.4 billion budget. The $3,500 or $6,500, whatever estimate you choose to use, is statistically insignificant while fully funding the maintenance of a new alternative voting option for voters. These solutions cannot and will never lower cost or increase efficiency in any meaningful way. They only reduce options for voters. With respect to voter fraud, the registrar noted 39 attempts at voter fraud, including 6 attempts at voters trying to vote more than once last year, but none of those instances involved a drop box, making it very difficult to claim that these solutions will reduce fraud. Moreover, the analysis has every appearance of a solution in search of a problem. A skeptic might see it as a pretext for limiting options to voters with no benefit to the community. In neighboring Loudoun County this year, the Electoral Board voted to eliminate 2 of 3 early voting sites in eastern Loudoun, claiming it would make voting more equitable, since western Loudoun only had 1 site. The voters from the more densely populated and diverse eastern Loudoun have a different interpretation of their intent. With minimal maintenance cost, it makes no sense to shutter the boxes now and eliminate a voting option. Now, I know that everyone in this room cares very deeply about their community and about our democracy. History will judge the decisions that we make here. And we all want those decisions to reflect well on this board and serve our community honorably. I must urge our registrar to maintain all 9 drop boxes over the full 45-day voting period. And I hope that the Electoral Board will unanimously support that action. With less than 1 week until Martin Luther King Day, I'm reminded of my favorite quote when Dr. King said, "The time is always right to do what is right." Thank you, board, for the time today.
Thank you. Frank?
Yeah, I would just like to say I encourage the board to consider some of the options you mentioned here, either reducing the number of drop boxes to 3 or reducing it to 10 days for the election period. I think we are not in line with the standards of drop boxes even in Virginia, where Fairfax County, which has 250 precincts, 5 times bigger than Arlington, has 1 drop box, and the average is 1 or 2, 3 drop boxes per county. So, given the cost, the efficiencies, and the other issues, not to mention the general impression of many voters, not all voters in Arlington, but many voters, still look askance a little bit at drop boxes. Like, what's the purpose? And we've heard stories of fraud. Even if there are no instances of fraud, it's the perception among the voting population about drop boxes. So if we really don't need them, and it can reduce the speculation of fraud, even then I think it makes sense to reduce them or reduce the time that they're used. So I would put that forward and encourage the registrar to consider that and the board to consider that. If I still have a minute too, I wanted to just speak briefly on one other topic, which has to do with the ranked choice voting, which was recently enacted for the primaries. I've had some communication with Gretchen about how the ranked choice voting was allocated among precincts, how the results could be. And I know, Gretchen, you provided information to the Board of Elections, and for the other races it was, but I didn't see it on their website that it was allocated by precinct. Honestly, I don't even see how it could be done. So given that in mind, it's something to consider moving forward, maybe providing some advice to the county board that, how are we going to be in line with the state mandates of reporting by precinct if it's not possible. So that's another comment I'd just like to make.
Okay. Okay.
That is all I have.
Okay, thank you. All right. So now we're going to reorganize. Per Virginia Code 24-2.2-107, the Electoral Board is required to meet after a new board member has been appointed to reorganize. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with nomination for the chair, move to a voice vote, open nominations for vice chair, move to a voice vote, and then by default, the remaining member is secretary. So,
May I make a suggestion to just change that a little? Could we just slate it? Could we
Nominate a slate of candidates.
nominate the slate and just do it all in one fell swoop?
that's,
If that is agreeable, I would move that Rich Samp be chair, Kim Phillip be secretary, and myself as vice chair for a period commencing immediately upon the conclusion of this meeting, just so that we're not shuffling seats.
second that. All in favor? Aye. So at the end of the meeting, we will take our new positions. So next time you see us, there'll be a little bit of shuffling, but not tonight.
And we can get her pen ready for
My pen in my
existing
hand.
forms.
My pen in my hand ready, right? Okay. So the next item on the agenda is old business. So this is where we.
Well, I think I have expressed views on this before. I do think that if we're dealing just with the presidential primary, I am guessing that the total vote in the county for both parties is probably going to be less. I mean, I'm not an expert on predicting outcome, but I'm guessing it will be less than 10,000 votes in total, probably, or give and take. You think higher than that?
So I ran predictions today, and I don't have my spreadsheet in front of me, but historically, in 2020, the Democratic primary did 45%. In 2016, we had the dual primary. Republicans did 17%, and Democrats did lower. It was like 32%. I could be wrong on that, 32 or 35.
Is that 17% of registered voters in Arlington? I didn't even know we made up that.
In 2016, so in 2012, it was lower. But for the last two presidential elections, it's actually been much higher than I would have anticipated had I not looked at the data. So I just, yeah.
In any event, my
Yeah.
off-the-cuff reaction
Yeah.
is that there is probably not going to be large interest in either of the primaries. And given that I suspect that the turnout will be well lower than it was in either the primary or the general election last fall, that I would move that we have all 9 drop boxes open for 10 days prior to the election, and that perhaps keep the 1 drop box here at the central location open 45 days, so that we would be matching every other jurisdiction that I'm aware of having at least 1 drop box open for the full 45 days.
A second.
I'll second it.
So now we can have a discussion. Who would like to start?
I would. I don't people who have been around the board, this will come as a surprise. But one, the first thing, which for me is most of the decision, is 24.2-707.1 provides no role for this board to have anything to say about drop boxes. Unofficial guidance from elect suggests that registrars consult with their boards about drop boxes. Doesn't require it. It couldn't require it. And it's not even a regulation. It's just the GREB, which I don't know what status the GREB has. I've never seen a court case that gives it regulatory authority. It's unofficial guidance. It would have the same authority as a notice or a revenue procedure to my profession of tax law. So I'm not particularly enthused about the board taking any official action on the topic. It has been pointed out that yes, this board does decide who will and won't be the general registrar for the county. However, I would question whether taking action against the registrar, be it for a renewal in 4 years when we come to that stage, 3.5 years, or to take action to remove a registrar because of his or her decision about drop boxes would open us as a board and the county to potential liability. It would be an inappropriate employment action. Another reason I would hesitate to make any official statement on the board. I have said before, I am very tepid to the cost argument. What is the appropriate amount one should spend per ballot in order for people to vote? I don't know what that number is. It's more expensive per ballot. My guess is it's more expensive per ballot to have people vote in person on election day than it is to have them put their ballot in a drop box. We get paid a pretty significant amount of money. Like just my precinct at 118 is costing the county, just for the human beings that are going to be sitting there, at least a couple $1,000 for facilities. And I don't know this, but for facilities that are not county owned, I assume we have some sort of arrangement to pay them. For those that are county owned, there may be some bookkeeping entries that go on about who's paying for it out of what budget. So it's an expensive proposition to have an election. It just is. I understand that the Postal Service is much cheaper. We can't really be certain what the per ballot cost is for drop boxes because it's hard to pin down precisely the cost of collection. However, we have had in this county, in previous elections, issues with the Postal Service. Having break-ins, having people steal mail, not ballots, not for the intention of going in and stealing ballots. They're after money and ballots get caught up in it. We have not had any reports of tampering with the drop boxes, of an issue of somebody breaking into the drop boxes and stealing even one ballot. I think that when you're talking about ballot security and election integrity, the idea that we're going to forsake a method we have complete control over for one which, no offense, I love the post office, lovely people, not the most reliable delivery service. I'd much rather have FedEx or UPS handle ballot stuff. But, and considering we have had, you know, that's not even theoretical for us. We have had that issue. Now I know my understanding is it was not Arlington, but Northern Virginia had an issue with somebody, a candidate's check being stolen from a mailbox. The Postal Service is also not particularly good about letting us know when compromises have occurred. So we can't even do damage control, potentially try to establish what the effect is. I understand that people have concerns about drop boxes. I think they should watch fewer documentaries with some not so reputable claims. And I think the answer to people having a lack of confidence in certain things or perceiving certain things is not necessarily to indulge their perceptions, but to educate them that their perceptions are incorrect. Now, we can't dispel all perceptions. There are perceptions on the other side about other things that I would not indulge either, because they are not founded on real, actual facts. So I don't, there's also a practical matter, a separate practical matter. This is a presidential election year. This is probably the worst year of any year to make any change to anything that is not absolutely required of us. To have a rule that we are going to institute for the March primary that we may not use for June and potentially November is confusing. I understand that folks from the league have talked about one of the precincts and its boundaries in a certain location. However much I might agree on principle, this isn't the year to do that. It may not even be possible given the code and rules about when we would have to do things, which we don't do anyway, the county board. So I'm not a fan of making changes this year. The best year to have made the changes was last year, as a matter of fact, in terms of when they would have the least impact in terms of making sure that people understand what's going on. We will have a lot of people, no matter how much outreach we do, we'll have a lot of people showing up at drop boxes that will be closed or covered up or otherwise locked. I'm not even sure what they would just be locked up. Do they have like some sort of cover that says?
We do not currently have covers for our drop boxes.
So they would just be
those have to
locked with
be
some sort of
purchased.
sign on them, maybe to say.
Yeah, when
this
they
will
would
be
have
open.
been.
Right. It will be on the website certainly, but we'd also have a distinction between when this drop box is open, which, to be technical, is not even required. We could have 0 24-hour drop boxes as long as the office is open during business hours to accept ballots. I wouldn't support that. It's fine to have one outside. They're all under camera surveillance. I got to see the cameras on election day. It was fun to watch people walk up to drop boxes. How many people have their kids put their ballots in drop box? And the last point is sort of like, to go back to the cost thing. This perhaps has not been made clear, and perhaps it shouldn't be, but we're on the board, and so I feel that it's appropriate for people to understand that the county board also has control of how many satellite locations we have. We don't decide to have early voting at Walter Reed, and we have some decision-making authority. The county board has decided that Walter Reed and Madison will have early voting. That means there will be early voting at those sites. We cannot say no. We can provide more than just the last 2 Saturdays of voting, but we have to open them at least for those 2 Saturdays. The board, the county board, has suggested, now perhaps with the changeover, the 2 new members would not support such things, that they would be willing, if we were to take away, if Gretchen were to take away drop boxes, it's not even us, we have nothing to do with it. If Gretchen took away drop boxes, they would consider adding early voting sites. That blows the whole cost thing out of the water. Way more expensive for us to set up an early voting site, even for 2 Saturdays, than it is to send somebody to that drop box. And we would have nothing to say about it, except to say, okay, fine, they said we have to have an early voting location, we're only going to open it for the 2 Saturdays that are required by code. But it still takes money. We have to find the locations. And I don't think that helps anybody. My concern is less the monetary cost of those things, it's the human cost. Finding people that will work at those locations. Early voting is not easy. It takes a lot of manpower for the 45 days, and then adding on to that, people to be at Walter Reed and Madison for the periods that we do have them open. So I'm more than happy to reconsider my opinion if there is a real security issue that can be presented about the drop boxes, and that the answer, which is the post office, is a superior answer on something that is not cost-based. Because, as I said, the cost base is actually, we're unsure of how bad it is. Because, as we said, there are lots of reasons why we can't pinpoint precisely. You can't just take the fact that it takes 2 hours to make the circuit on some days and multiply that by 2 people's salary. Because those people are getting paid anyway. If they weren't doing that, they'd be doing something else. They wouldn't be home, not collecting any money. So it's not an entirely eliminate the drop boxes, eliminate 2 hours worth of time. You'd need the 3, if you kept 3, you'd need them in strategic locations, which means you probably have the same sort of circuit you'd have to do, because you're gonna have to go all the way out to probably, North Arlington. You're gonna have to come here, you're gonna have to go somewhere over in South Arlington. So I'm not sure even that you would eliminate the entirety. You're not going to eliminate the entirety of the 2 hours. You're going to eliminate part of it. So the question is, how much money does that save? And is it worth it? I'm not going to use a very popular expression that has come into play for this sort of thing. In other words, I am not keen for the board to take any official action on this matter. I don't have a problem with the idea of when we see, I agree in some respects with Steve's point. We live in a state, and this is true of every state, a presidential election has to be compared to a presidential election. You can't compare a weird off-year election, like last year, to 2020 and say there's been a fall off in participation in terms of drop boxes. There's been a fall off in participation, period. There are fewer people who voted last year than voted in 2020. Now, the comparison from 2020 to 2024 is not going to be great either, because of circumstances that everyone's aware of from 2020. But it's at least better than trying to compare it to 2021, 2, and 3. And I think we need at least that to see what kind of demand there is for drop boxes. I would not want Gretchen or any registrar to have election by election, meaning I wouldn't want the primary to be 10 days except for this one outside the building. And then the primary in June is 10 days, but maybe there's only 3 available. And then November, we have all 9 for all 45 days. I would like the rule to be regular, and whatever that regularity is, it is. I don't think the marginal cost of picking a rule, and therefore picking a rule that works for November and not March and not June, is the best course of action. So I personally am not going to support a resolution of this board relating to drop boxes at this point, potentially ever, given the code. It makes me uncomfortable when the code doesn't provide us a role in this decision. So, but I am happy to have the conversation again when we have some real numbers after November to see if it is a precipitous drop from 2020 to 2024. 2024 looks a lot more like 2021, 2, and 3, you can have a conversation about whether it makes sense to have as many drop boxes for however long we have them. And maybe it would be worth it to remove some of them. I don't think we can make that decision or speak intelligently about it until we have another presidential election to compare to. May not be completely with Steve when it comes to having many, many cycles and continuing this conversation for another decade or so before we have any real idea of what we want to do. But I think we need at least a second presidential before we can decide where the numbers really are. Because if we see a huge increase in that number, it leads us to question whether we can eliminate them. That is all. That was a somewhat long and exhaustive thing. But I am also hoping we don't have to have this conversation at nearly as regular intervals as we have had it in the past.
Thank you. So I mean, my stance on drop boxes is if we can provide our voters an opportunity to vote, we need to be consistent. And I mean, in my example, I live within walking distance of my post office and the ballot drop box. I would rather take my ballot to the drop box than to the post office. I've heard anecdotally from voters who have put their ballots in the mail and it never got to us. And I do find that to be incredibly concerning that depending on the post office to get the ballots here and to get them here on time, to get them all here by the deadline for the last day that we can receive ballots. I find that very troubling. I think that we should keep all 9. I think they should be open for 45 days. So that is where I stand on that.
Let me just repeat things that I have said in the last year. First of all, I, as much as anybody in the county, the idea that people should have able to vote, and I certainly am not going to let cost considerations of expanding early voting locations stand in the way of meeting the need. I know that Gretchen has talked about the difficulty of accommodating people within this building, for example, and if it requires, particularly this coming fall, opening up a new location for early voting, I don't really see cost considerations there. But as I said before, I think that drop boxes really are a solution to the search for problem. Everybody has the option of submitting their absentee ballots by mail at no cost to them. As we've heard before, the cost is borne by the county for doing so. The early voting provides an option in multiple locations for voters. If people don't like the mails, particularly in the 10 days before the election, if we open up drop boxes, then they have all the time they need. I just think that the occasional anecdotal evidence we have, people saying that their ballot wasn't returned, as far as I know, every single one of them was given another opportunity to vote. I don't really know of, it has failed to report to me, significant numbers of people who have said, I never got a chance to vote because of my ballot coming in by mail. Furthermore, the idea that people who don't trust the mails are using absentee ballots doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because you only get your absentee ballot in the mail. So if you really don't trust the Postal Service, don't vote by absentee ballot. I do trust the mail. I put things in the mail on a regular basis, and I can't remember, I think once in my entire life, I remember a letter of mine not being delivered. Everybody, of course, has the option of dropping off their ballot in person at the voting location on election day. It certainly is not true that we haven't seen a drop off in use of of drop boxes, even if you're talking about the percentage of absentee ballots returned, a significantly lower percentage of absentee ballots were returned in 2023 than was true in both 2020 and 2021. So that is the cost consideration major? No. Do I think, Dominic, that we should not be spending lots of time every election talking about this issue? Yes, I agree. I don't think this is hardly one of the major issues facing our electoral board, and I think that everybody in the county to cast their ballots should be a much greater concern of ours. I really think drop boxes came into vogue at a time when there were people who were making a political issue in 2020 of how the post office was inefficient and need to be reformed, and let's do drop boxes as a way of showing up our district postal service. And to the extent that there were lots of problems being publicized then, I haven't heard about them recently. I just don't see drop boxes, particularly more than 10 days before the election, as being particularly important. Obviously, I'm in the minority here, so I just don't see why it's not a large amount of money, but I just don't see the need to spend the money.
Yeah. I'll make one clarification. I'm not imputing any particular motives to anybody. Part of this is we have had this discussion a lot, especially over the last year or so. I understand where the issue is coming from. And I don't think it's made in bad faith. I would like more people to provide good faith to the other side. This is true on all sides of political debates. I think too many people come to things with an idea that people have bad motives when, or bad intents when they make suggestions. But I will also say part of my position at this point is, I forget particularly what the issue was, but at some point, it's very convenient, not convenient, but convenient for this point, that Justice O'Connor recently passed away. She made a point in an opinion, I think it was a concurrence somewhere, that said, if I were writing on a blank slate, I would have different rules, but I'm not. We have 9 drop boxes. So we are proposing change instead of proposing doing something. If we were at the stage of 2020 and I was sitting on this board and we were having this conversation about how many drop boxes we should have, my recommendation to the registrar would have been at most 3, probably 1, but circumstances were different, and with a pandemic, who knows what that would have caused. But it probably wouldn't have been 9, may have even been, hey, what's everyone else doing? Only to find out that, say, Fairfax and Loudoun and Prince William are going to have 1 each, and I'm not even talking about population. I don't care. Fairfax and Loudoun could have half the population we do. They are geographically large places in comparison to Arlington. That to me is the bigger deal for how many drop boxes we should have. Is how easy is it to get to 1, not how many people need to go there. The likelihood that any of them would fill up seems weird to me. So I would say 9 is not my preferred number, but I'm not really in a position at this point to say we should change that number to something else. If I were on a slate of 0 and we were, first, 707.1 had just come in and the ability to have drop boxes had just been established, I might recommend a different thing and even pass a resolution recommending to the registrar that she only have 1, with the caveat that it's not our business, it's hers. But so I just want to make clear, I don't love 9 drop boxes. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in the circumstances I find myself in, I think it's best to stick with what we have at the moment.
Well, I think everybody has expressed their views, and in light of the clear preference of the board, I would I'll just withdraw my motion and say I don't intend to raise the issue again, but my point of view, I guess, has been expressed fully.
Every election, we collect data on the drop-off usage, so we'll get another round of data that we then can compare to the election, the appropriate election year, and see what the numbers stand. So, thank you for that discussion. Okay, so that's old business. Any new business?
I might add, I just learned recently that our office will be having its budget hearing with the county board on April 3rd. It should be a Tuesday. Check that I get my Aprils right. But it's our work session to discuss our budget, which will include the presidential election. And it is the afternoon, like 3 to 6. We normally go with our fellow courts and constitutionals, but they are all going on March 5th, and we will be otherwise engaged that day, conducting an election. So they have put us with parks this year. So it's Tuesday.
Does,
Okay, second. I'll send you guys the invite.
this is a true and actual question, is it generally the practice for us to be there with you? Do you want us there?
So
Is it better for you to just?
It's how far back do we go? So 10 years ago, it was the Journal and Registrar and the deputy that mainly went. Last year, I believe, was the first year Scott attended from the Electoral Board, which was really nice because I ended up having to present virtually that day. I could not attend in person, so it was nice that he was able to go represent the office in person. So, but I'm just letting, if you want to attend, you can. But these are, when we're with the courts and constitutionals, they have 10 or so presentations to get through. So we are given a very brief period to.
We may have more leeway this year because we're all by ourselves.
But we are with larger departments.
Okay.
So, but it's to the board. If you would like to attend, we can certainly include you on the presentation. And like I said, no, I don't have any decisions on the substance of what that budget might look like right now. So.
Second question, it's not about the budget people. Unless I am mistaken, for our February meeting, this room will be occupied by voting stuff.
Not necessarily. For smaller elections, we do voting in the lobby the first couple of weeks because we can reduce the number of staff we have. We don't necessarily need the full room. Okay.
So right now we would think that we could, I was just asking if we need to have a different.
Yeah, I have this room booked for the election starting on the 1st of February. But we move in here kind of as we think we need to. Okay. So it sounds weird, but when we think we need to, go ahead and add extra staff to manage. We're getting enough volume, but it doesn't make sense when you only get 13 people a day.
Then
to man an entire room.
For the benefit of the public, we would expect to be in this room for the next meeting, which would be February.
The 1st is a Wednesday, I believe, so it would be the
14th.
We're doing the second Tuesday.
Happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
13th.
Okay, so the 13th, but we may need to move to one of the other.
Yeah,
we'll be in this building.
By the 14th, we will probably be in this room.
Okay, so perhaps, I don't know if that other.
311.
Is that big conference room where the county board?
Oh, we can get 311.
Okay.
Depending on if it's available. We have to look and see what rooms are available. We can also do 317, which is directly across the hall. It just doesn't have the microphones and camera built in, but we could potentially borrow something from the county board.
If they have a room that's already.
We could do the county board if you really wanted to.
Ooh, could we sit in their seats?
Yes.
Well, I wasn't sure, because.
Maybe not though.
Funny
'cause
story,
they
like,
start
I
collecting
went to
yours.
London and took a tour, it was in the summer, I took a tour at the Houses of Parliament. When you go through the chambers, they tell you specifically, do not sit on the benches. You're not a member you're not a member of the House of Commons or the House of Lords, you should not be sitting on the benches. They very specifically tell you not to sit down.
But we'll
So those
find-
chairs are not reserved for county board, but. Okay.
No, because doesn't the planning commission hold their meetings in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hold our meeting.
They have, so the difference being that they have a whole crew who's running video for them
Yeah.
behind the scenes, whereas here we have Tanya running the video for us. We don't have a whole person situated on a different floor
Okay.
to run all the cameras. So.
Other new business?
And then you saw my note about electoral board training. I know, Kim, you wanted to go.
Yes, I actually signed up and I'm actually gonna send a follow-up email because I never got a follow-up email saying that I was registered. So,
All right, did either of you want to go?
I wanted to find out what the schedule of boot camps was. First of all, is there a meeting at Homestead this year?
Yes, there's a meeting at Homestead here
What is the
this
date?
year. Maybe I didn't actually click send on the email that I was going to send.
March, is that the annual?
It
meeting?
is March 17th
Through
through 19th.
And is there a boot camp
Yeah.
associated with it?
There should be a
Saturday
boot
should
camp
be
associated.
boot camp.
All right, so
Sunday,
there would be no reason necessarily to go to the February boot camp and the March.
Other than you could attend boot camp prior to the March election.
You wanted to have that.
But the only people who need to attend boot camp are the newly appointed electoral board members. Yeah, which are Kim and, yeah. So you do not need to attend any boot camp this year, Rich, if you
I
did not
would,
want
I
to.
would like to attend the one in March, I guess. not
Yes.
February.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm more likely to attend the March one, only because I'll be going to that anyway and toting myself out to whatever the hell February is.
Caroline County. It's gorgeous.
I'm sure it is. It was very lovely driving out to Fauquier County or wherever we were for,
Oh, to run out.
yeah. No, for the
no,
Viva.
For Viva, that's right.
No.
Yeah.
So that was March 17th to 19th. you said?
Yes. Yes.
On that subject, is there anything we need to do in terms of submitting names and stuff to Viva? Since they still don't seem to know that I exist.
So the reason
it's sketchy.
they will be issuing, yes, so I
Okay.
need a solid confirmation if you will be attending so that I know to.
No, I meant less
Both of
for
you.
those things, but just as generally, like our seats.
Yeah, no,
Viva.
everything else should be okay. It's just if you intend on going to Homestead, let me know as soon as possible.
I would go.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah,
do this.
because that
Yes.
is, yeah, it's important to get.
And for me, for the Saturday, so.
For the Saturday, I know what they did last year was they put it in an email, but there was like a QR code, there was something you had to click to sign up, and if you didn't click that thing to sign, it was very confusing.
One of my issues at the moment, Kim, is they still were sending things to Scott,
Yeah.
and he would then forward them to me. So
Oh,
that's why I was kind of asking, is I'm not entirely sure the folks at Vivo, like,
have everything updated, yeah. Okay.
know who should be the official 3 people that are the board members for.
Right. So you're getting emails from Lex.
Yes,
Okay, so Lex got you, so that's correct. It's Viva that doesn't,
yeah.
I think, okay.
I'll resend it to you. But as the person who has to do that job for the Registrars Association, it is a full-time job keeping up with comings and goings of people. Okay, but that, I have the information I need to be able to act.
This seems like a good time for that sort of refresh. It's the first, it's January.
Yeah.
I'm sure all over the state, there are new members of electoral.
There, yeah, no, there are, I did not, yeah, and I updated dates on the state's website, so everybody's appointment dates, yours have now been extended, so. Should be, but always double check the website to make sure I've spelled your name correctly and that the information is correct.
All right. Any other new business? Okay, so let's go ahead and election officer appointments. So we have a list of 1, 2, 3, 6.
Anything we should know, Gretchen?
No, these are 6 individuals who have applied since the last time we appointed election officers. So we are just adding them to the list.
October.
Yeah. So we're just adding them to the list of election officers.
Okay, and so they'll get the information to notify the parties if they want to be affiliated.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
And I did not receive a list
I'm
from
going to
either
move
party.
that we appoint these 6 individuals as election officers for a term ending next February, this February. Because technically we're going to come back next month and have to do a reappointment of the people whose terms technically run into March. I don't think we need to reappoint people that they can get letters from us. I think a letter from me that bears my signature to say that their term will be, because I think we can appoint for up to 3 years.
You can appoint for up to 3 years, or you can appoint for 3 months.
I would rather just let them go until 2025.
Okay. And we have to know to take them off the list for the next cycle.
Just don't put them on the list just yet. Create the list for February now, and then add them to the list.
That's fine.
My job is to make your life more difficult.
However, it's the electoral board's responsibility. We're here to serve.
You could just dump the list in Kim's lap after this meeting and say, you figure it out.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine.
So we're going for February 2025.
Yes.
Yeah, and both party chairs were contacted last week and given the opportunity to provide a list of individuals they would like to be nominated to represent their party, but neither one of them got back to me with the list. So
I will remind, since
Yeah.
we have the general representative of the Republican Party and the chair of the Democrats, your lists are due by the 20th for that February meeting, I believe. It's 10
it's
days
January 20th.
20th. It will likely just be the same.
Actually,
submitted
doesn't the
as that.
code say you have to meet the first week in February?
Yes, which was part of my motion last month.
So February.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's true. So we do need to meet what's
So-
considered the first week of February, the week of the.
Well, certainly not the 14th.
So it will be the 6th. You're right. It's not the
Sorry.
second Tuesday, it's the first.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
hate to pedal backwards, but
That's
it just
fine. But
occurs
you're
to
right,
me.
you're right. That was wrong.
Yep, so we actually have to meet on February 6th, correct?
Let's meet on the 6th. We could meet any day that week, but if we pick Tuesday, I'm happy to stick with Tuesday, just the first Tuesday.
Okay, does that work for you?
That works for me. I'm retiring on January 31st, so I'm.
So we will have a party, for you, Rich.
You were right, the code does require the first week of February, and it's 10 days before February 1st that the party's supposed to have their lists to us.
Yeah, and I'll send a reminder to both parties, letting them know the deadlines.
That's a question, Kim. Good question. So at that point, then and also for Gretchen, I guess, all of the list of all the election officers who served in the past will kind of be reappointed, along with any of these 6 new.
Yeah, we do annual reappointments.
Right, that's the way we do it. And so then the parties have the opportunity to those affiliated. But will the board continue its policy of allowing that to happen 10 days before any new meeting?
I don't see a problem with that.
That's convenient in case.
Yeah, the code requires us to, these deadlines are set by statute. You guys have to submit something for the February meeting 10 days before the 1st, that's in the code. We have to meet the first week of February to appoint election officers, that's in the code. Everything else is at our discretion, and I don't see any reason to change our discretionary policy of appointing at any given meeting at which we have people who apply.
So I move that the list of election officers provided be appointed for a term commencing immediately and terminating on February 28th, 2025.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. that's the last order of public business that we have. So I'm going to move that we adjourn this meeting. It is currently 6:53 p.m. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we're officially adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.